and pass this off to Jason.
Yay, welcome everybody, and welcome to another weekly programming of the Chamber. If you were with us yesterday, you saw that the business community rejoiced in the opening of the economy a little bit on May 4th. We're now into a modified phase one. Still can't go get your nails done, but you can go back to a restaurant if you have outdoor seating and 25% or less capacity indoors. And so with that, we wanted to make sure as we were ramping back up, we offered something that would allow you as employers and as employees to understand the human resource components to this. And so from ACE Human Resources, we have Christina Clark with us this morning, who is going to walk us through some of the challenges, watchouts, and things to be aware of as we continue to work in a telecommuting space. So with that, I would like to welcome Christina Clark.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. It's a delight for me to be able to share my HR knowledge with the small business community. It is definitely actually part of my mission to educate small businesses in Seminole County. So yes, we're going to talk about some HR issues that go along with COVID-19. The furloughs, layoffs, plus the FFCRA and how that's involved, and then the rehiring process and the remote working, what that looks like going forward. So, going forward. Sorry, guys. Oh, there we go. So we're obviously in a whole new world. I distinctly remember at the end of February, my daughter got ill and I went to the store and got hand sanitizer and tissues. And just 3 weeks later, it's black market items to try to get sanitizer or toilet paper. So obviously we're experiencing a different world. Before all of this happened, we were at a historical low at 2.8% at the beginning of 2020. And now, according to USA Today, in July of 2020, Florida will be looking at about a 15.6% unemployment rate. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. Obviously, as small business owners, it's unfortunate, and some people do have to go through the furlough and layoff process. So the words furlough and layoff are often used interchangeably, but they do actually have different meanings. So furlough is actually a temporary unpaid leave of absence. So for payroll, for the employment status, they are just on a temporary LOA. The reason businesses do this is because quite often their employees still remain eligible for benefits. And businesses make this assessment because they feel that it's really just going to be a temporary situation and we're going to be able to pick up business, and that way they can quickly reinstate their workforce. Now, using the term laid off is actually termination of employment for the reason of layoff. They may still be eligible for benefits, so employers do need to contact their plan administrator to find out both for the furlough and the layoff what the eligibility is. But in the layoff, business owners are more saying, I don't know what's going to happen, so we're just going to lay you off and hopefully hire you again, but I have nothing permanent knowing what is in the future. So there is a process you should follow. First of all, definitely communicate early. Nobody should be be having the conversation and be completely shocked. You should have conversations out there with the entire staff that we are reviewing business operations and revenues, and there may be a furlough or layoff process. When you do go and need to furlough or lay off, have two managers present you should really do this with all your human resource conversations, just so that you have two people recording the point of view. Do be honest. Don't be overly positive, but be transparent about what the business operations look like, and be mindful of what you're saying, because you don't want to make any promises about when they're coming back to work or anything like that. Do take notes, keep a log. Obviously, you may be laying off several employees. Keep a log of how they reacted. Don't put that in the personnel file, but you're keeping this in case there's some sort of employment lawsuit in the future and you have written down two managers' perspectives of what actually happens versus the employee who might be following the lawsuit. In addition to the conversation, you definitely want written communication. So a letter addressed to each individual employee. This will go in the personnel file, and you're doing this for a few reasons. To provide them a proof of their employment status, so that they can use this in the process for applying for unemployment. But there's some information you're gonna share during the meeting that they're not going to be able to retain, because psychologically their mind is thinking, how am I going to pay rent? And I know I've heard about how long it takes to get unemployment, and I still haven't gotten my stimulus check. So there's some important information on there, like tell them when they're going to receive their final paycheck, if they have a paid time off balance, how you're going to handle that for them, severance, and again, the medical benefits. So concerning current businesses and then phase 1, May 4th businesses that are going to start opening up and being exposed to COVID-19. I want to talk about a few things, HR issues associated with that and how to handle them. I have a cute little comic up on the screen where the healthcare professionals are talking about how many safety procedures have been put into place. It's very strict and they're going through the process, but at the end, they know that it is for the best interest of their coworkers and their employees that they follow these procedures. Now, what they're trying to say on the right is, while everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, this is maybe actually what's happening, and where they don't have everything that they were told to have. It's supposed to be comical, but very serious, actually. So what you want to do is create a written communication about setting expectations regarding company health and safety standards. So what you are doing as a company to protect the health of the employee and protect the health of the customers. And go ahead and go use the CDC prevention standards, put that right into the communication. List specifically what personal protective equipment you're going to provide and how they need to use this. This is essentially almost an employment policy that you're putting out, setting all the standards. And most importantly, on this communication, note that if they are experiencing COVID-19 symptoms, don't come to work, go seek medical care and get tested, etc. You'd be surprised that people need that in writing, that they should not be coming to work. So Jordan, thank you, is gonna put the link below if she hasn't already, I don't see, CDC prevention standards, so you guys can see what the CDC says to put on that. Some employment policies to review, or if you don't currently have, to start implementing. Review your attendance policy. Now, those who know me, I'm usually a stickler for attendance. However, during these rough times, we just want to be a little more liberal with, we don't want to be giving performance management documentation about attendance. We need to be sensitive, and so just be a little more lenient on the attendance policy. Sick policy is your paid sick time. Review that, see if you need to update it, and lastly, your remote work, teleworking, telecommuting policy is going to be where you set the standards for communication between manager and employee, hours that they should be working, expectations are still the same, and importantly, that any business equipment that is taken home is still property of your business and needs to be returned if you separate from employment. Now, unfortunately, hopefully this doesn't happen to you, but if an employee does report that they are sick with COVID-19, whether they extracted it from the workplace or somewhere else, they have COVID-19, this is how you're going to handle it. First, respond calmly and empathetically. They're obviously going to be extremely stressed out. You don't want to aggravate the situation, and you want to set the precedent that you're going to take care of this and you care about them. Then you need to ask them some difficult questions, which is the tracing. Who, specifically in the workplace, have they had contact with in the past 2 weeks? And then you need to notify those customers and employees directly. Now this, can anybody unmute themselves? What's this called? What tracing? You guys know?
Like contact tracing?
Yes, Jordan, yeah, yeah, exactly. So this is contact tracing. So you also want to notify all of your employees and customers. However, never disclose who the employee is for protection rights. Just let them know that this has occurred, that we're taking the following measures. And then you might need to shut down your workplace for one day or a couple of days to completely disinfect any areas. And then this is a OSHA reportable event if they extracted it at the workplace. A reminder that if there is a fatality from a work-related injury, it needs to be reported to OSHA within 8 hours. If there's inpatient hospitalization for a work-related injury, it needs to be reported to OSHA within 24 hours. So as soon as you have this information, you're gonna want to report it. And Jordan, thank you. Please put in the link below where you can find out more information about OSHA reporting. Now, the fun stuff. Families First Coronavirus Response Act. This was passed on March 18th, and there's just so much information out there that I do want to share with you guys. The Department of Labor frequently asks questions. Any question that you may have about this process and eligibility and how to pay is probably on there. There's over 50 frequently asked questions. But I want to share that it's effective from April 1st of this year through sunset on December 31st, 2020. It applies to certain businesses that are under 500 employees, and some businesses under 50 employees could possibly be exempt. Now be careful, you need to research this, and the research is being able to prove that essentially it's a financial hardship to either let that employee be away from work for an extended period of time and you can't protect their job, or it's a financial hardship to pay the payroll. So take that seriously and get your information together. There are tax credits for these payments. Definitely going to refer you over to a CPA to answer any questions about that. But I do want to share there are penalties under the FLSA if they're not followed. Eligibility reasons. So these are what's been added to the emergency FMLA, the extended FMLA, Emergency FMLA Extension Act, and the paid sick leave. So it's all related to COVID-19, obviously, because we're temporarily amending an act. So the first thing is if you are quarantined because the government said so. Second reason an employee would be eligible, if a healthcare professional told them you need to quarantine. Third reason is if an employee is seeking a medical diagnosis because they're experiencing COVID-19 symptoms. If they're caring for an individual that can't care for themselves and they're subject to self-quarantine reasons. Number 5 is a big one, and this is caring for your son or daughter if school or their child care center or any child care provider that can't be found, this is shut down and they can't telework, they can't do remote work, and they need to be at home taking care of their child. And then number 6, an employee experiencing substantially similar symptoms as advised by the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Getting down to the Emergency FMLA Expansion Act, as we said, it's normal FMLA, which is the Family Medical Leave Act. Generally, it's where you are, your job is protected if you need to take a leave to take care of yourself for a medical reason or take care of somebody else. So what's been added is the child care purposes, as which was number 5, as we just discussed. Excuse me. So part of this, which is different, is it requires employers to partially compensate after the first 10 days. It's at 2/3 rate of pay. Again, there could be an exemption for businesses under 50 if it would be a financial hardship. I'm going to talk about the documentation and record keeping that you will need to have on file and use during this process in a moment. Emergency paid sick leave is requiring employers to pay 80 hours of paid sick time. That's for full-time employees. So 2 weeks of an average that they're getting 2 more paychecks. So if they were part-time, it's an average of those hours, but just keeping in the sense, full-time would be paid up to 80 hours for the COVID-related reasons I discussed before. The eligibility for this is regardless. They could have worked 1 day and they would be eligible for the emergency paid sick leave. Going on to the documentation now, I put it all on here because there's a lot of information and I know people have been asking for it. It is also in the Department of Labor frequently asked questions. You can screenshot this, but it's basic normal information that you would think you would need, and then a couple of other things. So the employee who's requesting it, the dates they're requesting it for, one of those 6 reasons for the leave, and then an employment statement supporting their leave. So essentially I attest that this reason that I'm providing is true. I'm not trying to take advantage of you. If the government mandated an executive order, you need to know what entity had prescribed that order. If it was a healthcare provider that stated they need to self-quarantine, get the name of them. If it's because of the child care provider is unavailable, the child's name, the name of the school or the previous child care entity that is now closed because of COVID-19, and then another employee's statement saying, you can't find any other suitable person to watch my son or daughter. Finally, there is a new mandatory workplace poster that goes over all of your employees' rights. And this does need to be with your other mandatory workplace posters in an area that's common for employees to go. Jordan's gonna put the link below for us so that you can print that off right now if you don't already have it posted. And that's it for that. So just a little comedy mixed in here, makeshift work desks. So the remote working from home, I like the dog as the laptop or the washing machine. So let's talk about good things, rehiring your workforce and the future of remote working. So some considerations you want to take place before you rehire is if you laid off your employees, you terminated the employment, and there's no law saying that you have to rehire those laid off employees. But wait. First, if you laid them off based on past performance or if there were performance issues, again, there's no law saying that you have to rehire them. However, keep in mind there are 3 liabilities of possibly not rehiring your workforce. And the first one is the perception that it was wrongful termination in the first place. You're saying you laid me off, but you actually put me on laid off because I was over the age of 40, and now you're discriminating against my age. And the perception of wrongful termination can turn into an employment lawsuit, so you don't want that. If you do have a layoff employment policy in place, or in your communications, if you said something specific about rehiring laid off employees, follow that, because you've put it out in writing. And as I discussed before during that conversation with the layoff, keeping in mind the verbal managerial promises that may have been made, that we're definitely going to get you back in work by June 1st, or those can be considered binding contracts. Moving on to preparing before you rehire, the employment policies that we discussed, definitely the remote working policy, the health and safety standards communication that we discussed, PPE, sanitation, following CDC guidelines, etc. You also want to be prepared that your laid off and furloughed employees might have found other employment while you were in this period. So be prepared that there might be some roles that you do need to hire for. And also, during this process, you might realize that you no longer need that position to run effectively, and you might end up eliminating the role. So rehiring a furloughed employee is pretty easy. You move their employment status from temporary leave of absence over to active employee, and you let the employee know you want to put them back on the schedule. Of course, again, they may have found another job, but other than that, really easy to rehire a furloughed. You're not even rehiring them, you're just reinstating their employment, really. As we just discussed, you can rehire your laid off staff, bring on new staff, or do a combination of both. But what you do need to know is if you're rehiring your previous staff, they're still a new hire. So you still have to go through the I-9 verification process that they're eligible to work in the United States. I would go through a brief orientation, especially if you've added all these new employment policies and health and safety standards. But the advantage is this staff already knows the policies and procedures in your workplace, plus the culture, what it's like to work there. So that, of course, is a benefit. Compliance with COVID-19, 2 different things. The Department of Homeland Security with the I-9, they did make an exception that this is normally where you have 3 days from the first day of employment to verify that they are allowed to work in the United States, and the employee needs to provide that proof, which could be a passport, driver's license, social security card, etc. Well, the I-9 policy is that you have to physically have that in your hands as the employer. Well, right now we might be onboarding employees remotely, and we might not be able to physically do that. They've extended it, so when you are back to normal operations, you will then look at the physical. In the meantime, you do need to verify their employment, but wait until normal operations are back, and then you see the physical proof. And then Americans with Disabilities Act. So this is important. When offering a job, you can put a conditional offer of employment of being tested for COVID-19. And you can ask on a daily basis if employees are experiencing COVID-19 symptoms. You are allowed to take their temperature, and you may require them to provide medical notes to return back to work if they were taken out for COVID-19. So the only thing with that is keep in mind, it might be difficult for employees right now to get doctor's notes. I'm losing my voice. I'm turning into Christy. But so just keep that in mind. You might need to be a little more lenient, but the most important thing is being consistent. If you ask one employee for a medical release, then you have to ask all employees for that. So remote work expectations. As business owners, managers, we're like, yeah, they're sitting at home with their coffee, their laptop, they got a notebook, they're super productive, and reality is they're sleeping. And he looks really comfortable, so I don't blame him. But you need to set the expectations. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but get that remote working policy in place to set the expectations. Keep engaging with your remote employees, especially if this is new for them. Some of us have been working remotely for 5 years, but the rest of us who are new to this, they might feel isolated and not part of the team. So managers should check in daily, and then listen to your remote employees. Get their feedback, and recognize good work. So definitely go make that recognition. That's always a good human resource practice, but it becomes a little more unique when we're remote. So I always like to send out a blast email when an employee did a good job with a cute little meme in it. Also encourage work-life balance, because when we're working remotely, it's very easy to slide the two into place when we're taking care of children and everything else. Just encourage that work-life balance. And then finally, a collaborative teamwork culture where we get together, we're sharing ideas. You need to reinforce that you are a team. Times. Okay. Oh, I wasn't expecting that. I was like so worried that I was gonna go late. So I did see a lot of things going up in the chat. So hopefully maybe some people have some questions I can answer. But here's my contact information. Thank you, Jordan Spina, for helping by putting those links in. They're very informative. You can find out more information about me and how to contact me. Basically, you could do a hashtag solve HR headaches and see my face. So,
we had some good questions in the chat, and I know it's hard to see it when you've got your PowerPoint going. So Paul was asking if there are any liabilities if you bring back an employee at a reduced pay rate.
my initial answer is going to be it would need to be consistent with everybody else in the company. So if you're giving them a reduced pay rate because you knew they had poor performance before and you don't want to pay them as much money, well, everybody with the same experience and the same performance level needs to be at the same rate of pay. And I guess as so much with human resources, my next question is, why would you want to do that?
Great. And then Cindy also, I know that Jordan was putting a lot of links in there, but she was asking if there's any templates that you can share or that you recommend other than the links that we've already put in the chat.
Whatever anybody, I do have templates for all of this, and I would love to give back to the small business community by sharing them. So please email me at info@ACE Human Resources what you would like, and I will be happy to share that free of charge.
Awesome. Any other questions? We are a small group, so that if anybody has another question, go ahead and unmute themselves because we do have a couple minutes. And you can go ahead and ask her directly if you want.
Does Paul want to let me know that answer to the question why he wants to reduce? Or he can talk to me confidentially, privately.
No, I'll ask the question right now. So this is for a client of mine that, has a restaurant and they've got a number of employees and they were going to do a 10% pay cut across the board. So it would be to everybody. Just from a standpoint of with no revenues for the last 40 days, they just need some time to recover to feed the checkbook a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Again, if it's consistent across the board, that's the most important key.
Thank you.
Good question.
Thank you.
I know we've had a couple member businesses that have had to do that, so I think that's great information. And Ted is asking, what about those that you furloughed that don't respond and you're trying to bring them back? Is that considered job abandonment?
That would depend if you have an employment policy in place that if they are a no call, no show, essentially you would put them, if they're not responding and you think that they're abandoning the job, depends on what you have written in place already for your employment policy as job abandonment. Does that make sense?
She said yes. And Raheel wants to know if the new poster is going to be a requirement moving forward, or is it just temporary for right now during the pandemic?
Definitely keep that posted through December 31st, because that's when the act ends. However, if it's extended, then you'll want to keep it up, or they might give a new poster.
Priya would like to know if offering reduced hours to employees when they bring them back from furlough, are they still eligible for unemployment and pandemic coverage?
That's a great question, and the answer is going to be possibly. Definitely file for unemployment, and they will review each case and decide if they are eligible or not. Jason, unmuted.
Yeah, from a state perspective, an employee with reduced hours or wages, including hourly or tipped employees, or have been furloughed and will be returning to the job, could be eligible for up to 12 weeks at $275 a week. So as Christina said, you just have to apply and see for the specific situation. And so in most political answers, the answer is maybe. And so I would encourage those that have that question to go ahead and apply at floridajobs.org and see what the exact requirements for them would be.
Any other questions? Great. Well, thank you so much, Christina. I really appreciate it. You guys have her contact information. If you have any follow-up questions in the middle of the night, you suddenly think of that one thing that you really need to know, please reach out to her. Just a couple housekeeping things. There are some other great events coming up next week on Zoom. We have Seminole Tech on Wednesday night. On Thursday, we have our Good Morning Seminole, which is going to have all of our hospital systems as well as an infectious disease specialist. It's going to be a really great informative panel. And then coming up the following week, we'll have an after hours, and we have a great Zoom with our issues committee with someone from OEP talking about economy projections after COVID. So that should be really interesting as well. Was there anything else you wanted to add, Jason?
Thanks very much to our panelists at ACE Human Resources here. And additionally, the Chamber is going to be posting resources as well. So for those of you who are looking to open up on May 4th, per the governor's recommendation, and are taking the advice that says make sure you're communicating to everyone, we will have posters that you can post outside your business that are going to have a checklist of all the things that you have done as a business to protect them, to make consumers feel more at ease that you're being responsible. So very consistent with what we heard today. As long as you're communicating to everyone consistently, you should be in good shape. And the Chamber will help you do that as ACE Human Resources as well. And thank you all for joining.
Have a wonderful day. Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.